What are the biggest turning points in the Minnesota Vikings 2024 schedule? Yeah, the schedule got released 5 days ago, and we've heard a lot of analysis on what the Minnesota Vikings could do, what they will do, and when JJ McCarthy could start. We're going to talk all about that here on the Real Forno Show, but we're going to look at it in a big picture perspective. What are the big turning points? What are the big possible moments? What are the peaks and valleys? Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by Tyler Forness, publisher at The Sporting News, contributor on SKOL North's Purple Daily, publisher of Substack Run In Shooter, the host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, is producer Dave. Have not seen a single comment talking about Echo. Thank the Lord. It seems like some of our efforts have become worthwhile. And we are going to talk all about the Minnesota Vikings schedule. And look, it's a futile exercise to predict the games right now because there's so many variables from now until when the games are actually played. So we're going to talk about it from a big picture perspective, Dave. And because I think that is the only real way you can talk about it with some good analysis, because there's some interesting things about the schedule that could really make or break the Minnesota Vikings season.
Okay.
So let's kind of jump into it. I think when you take a look at it as a whole, this is the Kirk Cousins schedule. And yes, Kirk Cousins is gone, but we all know the narrative around him in noon games. Got a lot of them. So far, there are 16 games with the scheduled time. The reason why the last game isn't scheduled is because they modify the times based on the playoffs and based on how things will shape up. And like if the Vikings and Lions are competing for division title in week 18, guess what? That's probably the primetime game. Otherwise, they segment it specifically to make things more appealing to the fan and more interesting when it comes to playoff seeding and teams trying to make the playoffs. If the Vikings and Buccaneers are both fighting for a wild card spot and they're going to need results of their games in order to determine it, they're going to be playing in the same window. That's kind of how they make things work here. And I'm really intrigued to kind of see what ends up happening, how things will evolve with these instances. And we are going to have a real conversation kind of about how we get there. How do we get to a point where week 18 matters other than let's just make sure nobody gets hurt. Let's finish out the season strong, or we lose for draft positioning. We want week 18 to matter. We want week 18 to be the beginning of a playoff run. So let's kind of talk about how we get there, Dave. And I think the most intriguing thing here, when you take a look at the schedule, okay? And as you can tell, Dave has a couple different things that he's done. He's got the opponent, the date, the time, and then the divisional games are in a different color, which you can see that 3 of the final 4 games that the Minnesota Vikings are playing will be division games. Now, that has happened before. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings played their final 2 games in division. Packers and Lions, same locations. I think it was 3 years ago. The final 3 games were divisional games. The Bears, the Packers, and Lions. So this isn't abnormal for the Minnesota Vikings. And I think it's interesting that 3 of the final 4 of the final 7 are all divisional games. But I want to start by looking at the beginning of the schedule. You get the Giants. It's, as Jason says in the chat, Giants fans are saying week 1 is an easy win for the Vikings. Well, it could be, but it's also the NFL. And week 1 is a trap game. It's a trap game for everybody. You never know what's going to happen. What was it? 3 or 4 years ago, the Saints were supposed to host the Green Bay Packers, but they had to move the game to Jacksonville because of hurricanes. Well, the Saints blew them out 38-3. And you just never know. Week 1 is a very interesting predicament. You never want to fully count on anything, but it does feel like a winnable game. Vegas does have the Giants as, I think, 1.5 point favorites, but 1.5 point favorites means the Vikings would be favored on a neutral field by 1 and at home by 3.5. So Vegas does think overall the Vikings are a better football team, but not better enough to where they would be favorites on the road. But what I find interesting is the next 4 games. It's a juggernaut. Hosting the Super Bowl runner-up 49ers, hosting the Houston Texans, at the Green Bay Packers, which, whatever you think about Green Bay, that's a difficult game because you're facing a bitter division rival, and Lambeau Field is a tough place to win at, no matter who you are. The Vikings did get the win last year, and they did pretty much control the game, but Jordan Love came into our house and whipped our butts 33-10, and what Jordan Love showed last year was when he got to play you a second time, he really was able to do a lot of good things. He was able to make big adjustments against what you were throwing at him. He did so against the Detroit Lions when they beat him on Thanksgiving. He did so against the Chicago Bears, and he did so against the Vikings. Look, Jordan Love's a good quarterback. How good is he? We're going to find out over the next few years. Hopefully the Packers give him $50+ million and it ends up being a massive overpay. But we just don't know. He's a little bit of a wild card right now, but he's shown a lot of good things. And then you have the Jets, which is a home game, but you're playing it in London. And Aaron Rodgers, whether you like him or not, whether you think his politics are absolute lunacy or you think they're the gospel or anywhere in between, he is one of the more popular players in the National Football League, whether good or bad. And you talk to a big-time publicist, any publicity outside of, the big-time stuff like murder and sexual assault is good publicity. And Rodgers continuing to be in the news, talking to people like Pat McAfee, good publicity. And now you have your first 5 games against the 49ers, who almost won the Super Bowl, the Texans, who I think are my personal Super Bowl favorites this year, the Packers, who were the youngest team in football, and I believe are still the youngest team in football, but all those guys now have another full year under their belt, and the Jets, who have a great defense. And if Aaron Rodgers is 80% of what he was in 2022, that team is a Super Bowl contender as well. It's a really tough stretch. And it also kind of leads into the discussion that we're going to have about JJ McCarthy. Dave, I want to get your opinion before I go in because I have a lot of thoughts and I've written about him quite a bit over at the Sporting News, which you can check out all my written work there. Easiest way to do so, just search Tyler Forness, the Sporting News, click on my author page, and there's a bunch of stuff for you.
And his link to that is in the show notes.
Oh, that's even better. Hell yeah. So here's my question for you, Dave. When you take a look at the schedule, not like, let's say, like, there's obviously the variable of him being ready, and we just don't know that. If you could take that variable out with JJ McCarthy and that not when he's ready, and you just kind of have that understanding with you already, where do you start JJ McCarthy? What game on the schedule to you looks like the best point to start JJ McCarthy?
Well, first off, let's see how we are once we hit the bye. If Sam Darnold isn't cutting it, the games aren't close, we're getting our asses, pardon my French, handed to us. I suspect it'll be after the bye week, whether JJ's ready or not. I fully suspect that's when that'll happen. But I don't expect that scenario to play itself out. I expect Sam Darnold to be competent enough and hopefully unlock another level in himself working with KOC that we're, 2 games before the bye we've won. 3 games, maybe. Heck, I'd pick the Jets. We've never lost an international game, right? And who knows, Aaron Rodgers' other Achilles may have popped by then. We don't know.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, I would put it, depending on how it's going, if Sam Darnold comes in and we have Lions, Rams, Colts, Jags, Titans, Bears away, and he's still winning, it's going to be next year. Otherwise, I look at that 3-game homestand starting in December as the primary spot that we would see J.J. McCarthy.
Okay. There's a lot of different times we could end up seeing J.J. McCarthy. And that's something I find very interesting here, Dave, because I found when I kind of dove into the schedule, I found 4 inflection points where I thought, you know what? It makes sense for J.J. McCarthy to start playing. And one of those inflection points was week 1 against the New York Giants. And one of the reasons with these inflection points is you don't have all the information at your fingertips. The Minnesota Vikings will. They're going to have J.J. McCarthy in the building every single day. They're going to see how he prepares. They're going to see how he absorbs information. They're going to see how he begins to process it when he's on the field. They're going to see all these things. And we're going to get some of that because practices, most of them are open to the public in training camp. And there's so many little details about that. But when you're having the conversation about when to start him, it's all going to come down to, is he ready? And I think, is he ready? You could theoretically throw him in at any time. If he's ready going into week 2, you start in week 2. And I think you can kind of go with that. And there's always the variable, as you kind of mentioned. One of the big things with Sam Darnold, if he's playing well, don't stop. Don't stop playing him. Ride the wave. The Vikings, in their history, I'm 34 years old. In my 34 years, in my formative watching years, which I'm going to call starting in 1994, the Minnesota Vikings have always rode the wave. If a quarterback plays well, they don't replace him. They stay with it. Your Case Keenums, Teddy Bridgewater probably should have been given the starting job at a certain point, but Keenum had the team winning 13 games. You don't replace him. And is that fair to Teddy? No. But look at Tom Brady. Takes over for an injured Drew Bledsoe, keeps winning football games. Bill Belichick's like, you know what? We're going to stay with Tom. We think Tom gives us the best chance to win right now. And you know what? It paid off in 6 Super Bowls. And I'm not saying that starting Sam Darnold is going to pay off in 6 Super Bowls, but it's the concept. It's the idea.
Or like 7, 8, 9, or 10.
Yeah. Hell, even 1. Like, if it's 1 Super Bowl, yeah, it's worth it. David, that's a funny line. I'm only 34. I look 35. I don't usually hear that I look older than I am. That's probably a first for me. But if Darnold's playing well, you just play him. And you don't have to, even if J.J. McCarthy's ready, don't mess with success, man. And I think that's going to be one of the more interesting things about this whole process. And I think when you look at more factors of that, and you look at different points in the season where it could make sense. So let's say Sam Darnold's playing fine. If Sam Darnold is just playing fine, let's use quarterback rating as a barometer. A really, really good quarterback rating is if you average over 100. Okay. Let's say Sam Darnold has a quarterback rating of 91. Sounds pretty good, right? That would tell you Darnold's making good decisions. He's leading the Vikings to points, and he's not making back-breaking turnovers. So I think that's an important factor here. If Darnold's just playing average football, then you replace him and when JJ is ready. And I think that is going to be the biggest factor here. But my first inflection point, as I mentioned, was just week 1. If he's ready, just play him. And I think there are points in the schedule, and we'll talk about it, where it does not make sense to start JJ McCarthy. Because the way the schedule sets up is a little weird.
Mm-hmm. I got a quick question.
Go ahead, Dave.
Do you view Sam Darnold, could he be the Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes? And Sam Darnold plays that while JJ learns.
Absolutely, he could be. We just don't know. Quite frankly, we've never seen Sam Darnold play up to his potential. You've seen flashes like a quarter, a half, or with his first season with the Carolina Panthers, 3 games. But you've never seen him with a good supporting cast, except the one game that he started in San Francisco. Like, this guy was the 3rd overall pick, and he was thrown into a dumpster fire with the Jets. I'm not saying that Sam Darnold is ever going to be a great quarterback, but I think you could see a Geno Smith type renaissance with Darnold because there's talent there. Everybody sees it. Everybody knows it. But can you ever actually get him to extract it and play consistent? I think because he's only 26 years old, there's more of a possibility than it would have been with somebody else. And I think that's going to play into how all this factors together. And the reason why I'm keeping this very ambiguous, we just don't know so much about the situation. So we're talking about it in very loose terms. I don't want to speak anything concrete because it's not. Nothing is set in stone here. And I think that's how you have to have these conversations. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion on what I think will happen, what I think they should do. But I'll just say this. We have to keep a fluid approach and let the information come to us. Because when the information comes, then we can make a more informed and smarter decision. And I want to address Dave L's comment here. It just surprises me how many people were so persistent we drafted top 10 QB this year. They're just as persistent he sits a year. Without actually having dove super far in, I don't think there's any data that says explicitly if he sits X amount of time, he will be great because every quarterback is different. Peyton Manning did say that he probably would have benefited to sit a year. He set the NFL record for interceptions thrown in his rookie year in 1998 with 29. Now, he didn't go into a phenomenal situation. He had Marshall Faulk. He had Marvin Harrison. But it wasn't a phenomenal football team. There's a reason why they picked number 1 overall, right? So these conversations are something that we're just going to have. And there really is no answer. I know Dave didn't ask the question, but to when a guy should start or how long they should sit. Everybody is different, and you have to treat them that way. You have to treat them as their own individual person and decide when they are going to start. Now, I saw Keith said that all of the top 5 QBs started year 1. How many of them did they want to start year 1 versus how many of them actually started and won the job? So
Patrick Mahomes didn't start his first year.
He did start week 17, but I wouldn't count that. But I think that's part of the discussion, right? They didn't want him to start all year because they wanted him to learn. They wanted him to develop his mechanics because nobody doubted he had talent. The doubts were, can he figure out how to be an NFL quarterback? Because there were a lot of things that he did at Texas Tech that were like, wow, this guy's got it. But there were some things like, okay, can this guy ever figure out how to just do a 3-step drop and throw a quick slant? That's what they just didn't know. The really smart football people knew how special Mahomes is going to be. That's why Andy Reid, John Dorsey made the massive jump up to go get him. They knew. They knew that if you gave him the right environment, you could get him to do those things, you had somebody special. Josh Allen, they didn't want him to start. Injuries got him in the game. Justin Herbert, a punctured lung from an injection by a team doctor on Tyrod Taylor got Justin Herbert in the game. And then Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson got in because Joe Flacco was just god awful. Not because they wanted him to start. They just knew that they had to. And then it depends on who you think the other QB in the top 5. I think those are the consensus top 4. I would consider CJ Stroud a potential top 5 quarterback, especially when we talk about after 2024. So let's just put Stroud in there. Stroud won the job. He won the job out of camp. And if you win the job, you just go with it and you don't worry about it. And I think if those teams had their way, Mahomes wouldn't have played it down. But week 17, everything's already clinched. Doesn't matter. So for my money, he didn't start his rookie year. Justin Herbert, they wanted him to sit. Injuries forced their hand. Josh Allen, same thing. The Bills probably didn't want Josh Allen to play for like 2 years because he had so much to learn. And look at it, how much he struggled at times during those first 2 years. And then his third year, he boomed and started to really become the Josh Allen that we know. Yeah, you're going to get some of that Brett Favre in him where he makes just these bozo throws, but he's so special and he can do so many unique things that you just live with it. And how is this going to relate to JJ McCarthy? McCarthy's going to tell you when he should start. He's not going to tell you by being like, Coach, I'm ready. Like Vikings released a video kind of detailing the whole draft process. And McCarthy said in the first meeting at the combine, Coach, I'd run through a brick wall for you. Yeah, that's a guy that you want on your roster and playing for you. But that doesn't mean he's ready. Anybody in the league will tell you, yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm ready. There's ego with it. And everybody has an ego. Everybody listening and watching the show has an ego. Some just have an ego where it's a problem. Some have an ego where it's not. Some have an ego where it's basically non-existent. And I think those, like, football players that have enough of an ego where they're not going to tell you, you know what, I should sit. No, coaches don't want that kind of mentality. They want a guy who wants to be out there. Somebody's going to tell you that they should sit. Like, that's just not how it works. So how McCarthy handles things will tell you. Should he play or should he not? Let's talk about a couple other key points in the schedule, Dave, where I think that it makes sense for McCarthy to start. Week 7 against the Detroit Lions.
After the bye.
You have, it's after the bye, and I think that's important. But the one interesting thing about being after the bye, the first game after the bye, so that second game after the bye week is a Thursday nighter. Do you want JJ McCarthy's second start to be on a Thursday night tilt? I think that is a question that could make things a little murky. But I think that they're going to want his first start to be at home in more of a comfortable environment if they can help it. Now, if Sam Darnold gets injured at the end of the Texans game and can't go against Green Bay Packers, guess what, McCarthy? You're starting, buddy. And you can't control those kind of things. And that's how Justin Herbert got his first start. That's how Josh Allen got his first start. Like, you can't control everything. So
I could see that almost in reverse.
Rather
than the Lions being it, that the Rams game is actually where he comes in. Reason being, he doesn't have to worry about, rest between those 2 weeks. There's no recovery time for him because he didn't play. Sam Darnold played against the Lions. And then he starts on the road where there's less pressure on him because it's on the road. He's not playing in front of U.S. Bank Stadium full of cheering fans, and that he could get his jitters out that way. And that may be a possible starting point as well.
So I see where you're going with this. I especially think, as Keith mentions, he'll be at the LA game, because with the LA game, half the stands are going to be Vikings fans because, and I think people who live in LA, and Keith, you can attest to this if you want, to my knowledge, and Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings said it, I think earlier today, and he lives out in LA. LA don't give a shit about the Chargers and the Rams. They care about the Raiders. And there are a lot of transplant fans. If you remember when the Chargers and Rams first went back in, I think it was 2017, those stadiums were filled with the other team's fans. They're still getting filled with the other team's fans. Why? Because there's no real association with those teams, with this generation. People my age, if I grew up in LA, like my formative years would have been without a team in Los Angeles. So guess what? I'm picking a team elsewhere. Now, maybe I get that association with the Raiders because they were in LA, but they're also a hop, skip, and a jump away from Los Angeles. Oakland is what? Maybe about 5-6 hours from LA. Like that's close enough to, and being in the same state, like, yeah, Southern and Northern California feel like completely different worlds at times, but I'd probably end up being a Raiders fan or pick somebody else. Probably was not going to pick
You're going to see the transition.
The Rams.
When the Rams were in LA back in the olden days, right? When I was watching them as a kid, they were the team. It was without a doubt. LA cheered for the Rams. We're talking the Mud Bowl. It's, back in the 60s, 70s, stuff like that. And then the Rams moved off and they went to St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And LA didn't have a team. Oakland was there. Well, Oakland, Al Davis says, screw you, Oakland. You aren't buying me a new stadium. You're not doing what I want. I'm going down to LA. And so Oakland goes down to LA. And all these fans that were disappointed because the Rams left migrated to the Oakland Raiders. And the Raiders were good, relatively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So they became Raiders fans during that time period. And then the Raiders eventually make it to Vegas, which is probably a shorter trip to Vegas from LA than it is from LA to Oakland, back to Oakland. And so they just stayed there. That's that generation's type of fan. And when Kroenke moved the Rams back to LA, everybody's like, screw you. You left us. It was almost like the Browns when the Mayflower trucks came. That was the Colts. Even that. When they went and a team leaves a city, and it's not because of anything the fans or the city did, but it's because of some BS owner, there's a real heartfelt disappointment. And fans at that point say, screw you. We'll find a different team. And I think that's what happened to LA. And when the Chargers moved up, they'd pissed off San Diego. San Diego wouldn't buy him a stadium. And it's just, there's no love there.
No. There's really no love nationwide for the Chargers either, which doesn't help any. But one of the reasons why I like the Lions, I don't think would work is because it would be the short week the next week. But I also think that it wouldn't work, Dave, for your idea to start him on Thursday Night Football. You're not going to have your backup quarterback focus on the game plan for the following week and not even you're not going to have him focus on the Rams when the Lions are coming up. You're going to have him try to game plan for the Lions. So I think the only way that he starts against the Rams, from my perspective, is if he starts against the Lions or Darnold gets hurt. Because I don't think that they're going to do that thing where they have him focus only on the Rams for 2.5 weeks and they completely have him ignore the Lions. Because what happens if he has to go in? What? Yeah, you could do some schoolyard stuff, but though, preparing for a team and the playbook and getting drills of practice, because you'll install a few new plays each week. And those plays could end up mattering in a big, big, big way, especially if they're gadget plays, trick plays, or if they're just a unique concept that we're building because, hey, we've been doing this all year. So now we're going to counter with this and we haven't shown this look before and we can take advantage of their defense. So I just don't think it's plausible, but I understand what you're thinking. I think if the Rams were a Sunday game, I think you'd be spot on, and that would make a lot of sense, where it's going to be a more neutral environment and there's not going to be the pressure of playing in front of the home crowd. I will say he played in front of the home crowd at Michigan. So I don't think, and he dominated when he went in the horseshoe. I don't think that'll be a factor. I don't.
Just a few fans there to watch him.
Yeah, only 108,000. No big deal. Just 108,000. Let's talk about the game that I think could also make a lot of sense. And that's Week 9 against the Indianapolis Colts. And I had that on there for the same reason that I had the Lions on there. You get 10 days of rest. You get 10 days of rest. All right. Before I kind of dive into that, let's talk about Keith's question. Do you think it's possible JJ outplays Darnold in camp and preseason and they still start Darnold week 1? Yes. And just because you outplay somebody, what about the process behind it? What about the little things? Is McCarthy outplaying him because of backyard bullshit? Or is he outplaying him because of his knowledge of the scheme and being able to attack and being able to do a lot of different things? Where's his knowledge base? Where's his comfortability? And also, was McCarthy only playing against the second and third teams? Where Darnold, the little action he had, he was playing against first teams? I think those things matter too. So I think there's a lot of different possibilities there. But I do think it's possible that JJ looks better and he ends up sitting. And Darnold gets the start for the first few weeks. But we'll find out. I think that's what makes this whole thing interesting. And with the Colts, home game, so it's going to be less pressure. You're not going to have to deal with your first start having the opposing fans really get on you. And I think that's a big thing. Comfort, Dave. It's like going to Cracker Barrel and ordering a chicken fried steak. It's just comfort food. Going to Waffle House and getting a waffle and a hash brown scramble bowl. Oh, I love those things. They're so good. It's just cheese, sausage, hash brown. That's it.
And you immediately switch to food.
Hey, what? Where's Gary? Where's Gary when I start talking about food? That's the food homie right there. We love Norse Fias, but Gary is the one who's the food boy. But the Colts was one. The fourth one, the Arizona Cardinals. And we're going to talk a lot in the coming weeks about this inflection point. The Vikings have 3 games on the road in a row, followed by 3 games on the road at home. The Vikings will play 4 out of their last 7 games at home. 5 of their last 7 games at home. That's going to be massive. If the Vikings after 10 games, Dave, are 5-5, they can go 5-2 in their final stretch, just winning at home and losing on the road, and make the playoffs. That's where it's going to be really interesting how this schedule shapes up, because the end of it, Cardinals, beatable. Falcons, beatable. Bears, beatable. Seahawks, beatable. Packers, beatable. Lions, I think they'll probably get swept by the Lions. It's not a popular take, but that Lions team is really good, and they play really, really hard, stout football. That's going to be a very difficult game to win. And I'm going to be honest, I projected this team to go 7-10 just based on, hey, do I think that they're better than this team? It's kind of how I approached it. Are they better than this team? Are they, like, if they play on a neutral field, who wins? Yeah. I think the Vikings go 7-10. But I also think that a few things go their way. They could go 11-6. Like, this isn't a bad roster. And I think that's what makes things really interesting when talking about this team. Vegas Insider. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, do they beat their total wins? Now, Vegas Insider has the Vikings underdogs in all but 3 games, and one of those it's even the Colts as of yesterday morning. But this is their overall win prediction for the Vikings. Do the Vikings beat them? Beat that 6.5?
I think they beat it barely. I think the range for this team is 5-12 to 10-7. I think if things go well, look, if they hit on JJ McCarthy, he starts week 1 and he balls out like CJ Stroud, this team could win 12 games. If they get that 100th percentile rookie outcome from JJ McCarthy, this team could do like make real waves. That's an if though. And that's a big if. I'm not putting those kind of expectations on JJ McCarthy. Neither should you. But I will say, it's not absurd to think McCarthy could come in what this offense is with an theoretically improved running game and all of a sudden ball out. That's not an absurd thought, especially if Hawkinson comes back and starts producing right away. Let's say he comes back against the Lions week 7. You'll get Hawkinson for 12 games. More than I would have expected. I still expect him to miss half the season. That based on looking at how long it takes to heal from a torn ACL. I think October 20th is a little too early, but that's like a week before the 9-month mark. You're asking for an Adrian Peterson godlike recovery. Is Hawkinson going to heal like Adrian Peterson? I personally don't think so, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. I think he'll probably return around the Jaguars game. That's my guess. He'll miss half the season. But you just never know with this team. They're very well coached. They're improving on defense. They have more talent on defense this year. And the young guys that played last year, guess what? They're more experienced now. Therefore, they should be better players. The defensive line is still rough, but you have pieces in the back 7 to be able to make things work. And you have pieces at edge rusher to wreak havoc. There's some real intrigue to this team where you could see a world where they win 10 games. Quarterback you're going to have to hit. And McCarthy's going to have to be really good. Or Darnold. Darnold could be really good. But all that being said, I think the Cardinals make the most sense for his first start as well because it's 3 straight home games. And he'll have sat for 11 games. Now, do you want him to sit for 11 games? Nah, you'd rather have him play all of them. But sometimes development is not linear. So you have to be okay with him doing some of that. Cheddar, did you fart? Yeah, you farted, buddy. I can smell it.
I still think it's going to be down to KOC and McNown making sure he fills the boxes, that he can accomplish the tasks that they want him to and can do it proficiently before they elevate him to the starting position. Now, the question is, how quickly can he get there on their list of items to do? And if he's ready week 1, roll with him week 1. If he's not ready until, week 7 or week, 13 against the Cardinals, then let that be that. And then we just spent $10 million on a backup quarterback, which is a fair price for a backup quarterback.
Oh, it's a very fair price. And yeah, does it seem like a lot for a backup? Sure. But Nick Mullins cost under $2 million. Nick Mullins throws a lot of picks. Darnold's probably not going to throw a lot of picks. Yeah, he may not give you the high-end stuff, but you expect everybody around to give you the high-end stuff. We'll see. We're going to find out if the Sam Darnold experiment works. And at the end of the day, in this cap environment, $10 million is 4% of the cap. That's nothing. That's nothing. So I'm not too worried. Let me send this text to my wife. Yes. Hey, you know what? Lincoln. He was born in Springfield, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago.
No,
yeah, he would
it's
hate
in the
Packers.
middle of Illinois.
Well,
if you want to say
it's
outside Chicago,
like,
it's a ways from Chicago.
Yeah, like what, an hour and a half?
Yeah, something like that.
That's outside of Chicago. All right, now let's pull that.
But he was a
schedule
wise
back
man, and he knows his business.
And he was from Illinois. Therefore, he hates the Packers. This is how this works. I want to pull the schedule back up because I think there's some more interesting things about the schedule. We already talked about the 3-3. We talked about the idea of they're going to play 3 road games followed by 3 home games. I also think it's interesting to talk about when you're facing some teams, because when you face them is going to be just as, if not more important than facing them, period. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings, they didn't have Justin Jefferson, but they got the Niners without Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel. Best case scenario, right? Their star tackle, who's just a freak of nature mover, and without Deebo Samuel, that's a big win for the Minnesota Vikings. Playing them when they did mattered. So what's it going to look like this year? Well, let's take a look. They don't play the Bears until week 12. That could end up being bad. What happens if Caleb Williams is really, really good, but it takes him 6 weeks to figure it out? Well, you're going to get 2 Caleb Williams games where he's really, really good. And he's not really figuring it out anymore. He's kind of already figured it out, and now he's just playing good football. That matters. Playing the Packers at Lambeau in September is big. Why? Unless it's raining, you ain't dealing with weather, buddy. And not having to deal with weather is a big thing. And that's where the biggest portion of the schedule is going to matter here, Dave. Take a look at December and January. Minnesota Vikings, December 1st, play at home. December 8th, play at home. December 16th, play at home. December 29th, play at home. January 5th, projected, play in a dome. They play 1 game outside in the month of December or January going before the playoffs start. That game's in Seattle. Seattle isn't exactly a cold weather city. It might be 40 and rainy. It ain't going to be
nasty.
It ain't, yeah, it may be nasty, but it's not going to be 0 degrees. No. It's not going to be snowy. It could be bad weather. Yes. That's your only bad weather game. I would rather play in rain than in frigid temperatures and snow. Personally, I and you know what? I think people are going to have opinions on both sides, and I think there's valid arguments for both. I would rather play in the rain than in snow and cold. But it all depends on who you are and what you want to do. So I think it's really important, especially if the Vikings turn it on late, because J.J. McCarthy started week 7, and then he's really figuring it out, and he's really getting in a groove and comfortable. Now, all of a sudden, after those first 5-6 games, hey, JJ, you're going to play 1 game outside, and it's going to be at Seattle, and you're going to be in a dome. Okay, that sounds great. Like, that matters. And if the Vikings had this schedule like next year, where they don't have to play outside outside of Seattle, like if that outdoor game, Dave, was Miami, be phenomenal. Hey, guys, let's go to Miami in December. Okay. Let's spend Christmas on South Beach. Go see a Vikings game. That sounds great.
Well, let's look at the roof situation. We start out Giants outdoors, but it's September. Then the Niners are at home under U.S. Bank. We have Texans at home under the roof. Packers in September up in Green Bay. That's not too bad. Jets away. That's an outdoor stadium. It's got a big hole in the roof. Not too bad. England doesn't get that bad unless it's way late in the wintertime when it's wet and it's 32 degrees. Then you have Lions. Obviously, both places at home and away are under a dome. Rams under a dome. Colts under a dome. Jaguars, it's Florida. They got an open roof stadium right now. So it's still going to be nice. November in Florida. You have the Titans right now still outside. They will eventually have a dome. They do not now, but outside. But that's not too bad. That's middle of November. It'll be a nice fall, crispy day. Bears, at the Bears, it's November, right? That's going to be a nice fall, crispy day, generally. Then we have the Cardinals, dome. Falcons, dome. Bears, dome. Seahawks, outside. Could be cold and wet. That's probably the worst weather game of the season. And then we have Packers at home, dome. And then we have Lions finishing up in their dome. There's a whole lot of domes on that schedule. So that gives us an advantage.
Yep, it absolutely does. And I'm really excited to kind of see how this plays out. One of the other big kind of inflection points that we should talk about here before we wrap up, because we got to wrap up here pretty quick. We're getting close to 7:00.
We got 99 people watching. I want to see it bump up to 100 real quick.
It was over 100. It's at 100 right now.
Cool.
Very appreciative of all you guys. Hey, if you're new here, thank you. Like, comment, subscribe. Easiest way to support us. We also have memberships available. I'm going to work on trying to get some cool interviews this summer. I get to sit down and talk to Blake Cashman next week. So we'll do something with that, but it's not going to be a he's on the show kind of interview. So, but we're going to have some fun stuff, and we're going to try and do some more members only stuff this year. But being a member is a great way to support us. If you can't financially, guess what? Subscribing, leaving a comment, hitting the like button. They're all free, and they're all greatly appreciated. Let's talk about the hardest stretch, because I think the hardest stretch here is honestly weeks 2 through 5. Weeks 2 through 7. You get 49ers, Texans, Packers, Jets, Lions. If you come out of that game with that stretch of 2 wins, if you can be 3-3 after week 7, this is a playoff football team. It's a playoff team.
I agree. That is the toughest spot.
Yeah. If it's 2-4 or 1-5, that's fine, I guess. Like, look, it's not ideal, but it's a brutal stretch with some really good football teams. So if you end up losing against the 49ers, Texans, Packers, and Jets all in a row, I get it. I ain't going to like it. It's going to suck. But that's a really good group of football teams. And you are in a season of transition. You could end up beating all of them. You have the ability and talent to beat all of them. Can you?
And some of the best coaching in the league on both sides of the ball.
I will say getting that Packers game at home in December, I'm going to be honest, Dave, I've already marked it as a loss. You know why?
Why?
Matt LaFleur is 15-0 in the month of December. He's never lost.
Now, what I said yesterday on Tool Bloggers I think it was yesterday, is the Packers tend to play poorly at the beginning of the season, and then they crank it up. That may be an advantage for us in September.
Yes, 100%. And I think a lot of that just has to do with coaching. They're not coaching them to play bad, but they figure things out and they fix it. And they do a great job of fixing things in season. And that's a credit to Matt LaFleur, who is one of the best coaches in football. A hire that we kind of made fun of in real time deserves all the credit in the world. The Packers got that hire right. They nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. And boy, does that hurt to say. I hate saying good things about that team. I really do. But guys, that is our show. Thank you very much for joining. I do a little programming note. Next week, we may have a show on Monday and Wednesday. We may not have a show. Don't be alarmed. Monday is Memorial Day. Wednesday is my wife's birthday. If you think my wife is letting me record a show on her birthday, no, I wouldn't do that to her. Unless she's like, nope, I want to go do this. And then I guess I'd have a show. But now we're gonna spend time together on her birthday. So we may be taking a week off next week. Just be aware. Don't panic. We'll let you know if there's a show. If we end up doing maybe an interview, and then we post it on one of those days. I'm gonna try to work on getting some really cool stuff over the course of the next few weeks and months, and get some people in the industry to come in and talk about Minnesota Vikings, and maybe some people on the Vikings themselves, because I think that could be a lot of fun. In the meantime, I want to thank everybody here for watching and listening. Make sure if you're on the podcast feed, like, comment, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. Tell us why we kick ass, or, well, please don't tell us why we stink. Send me a DM for that, but say good things in the reviews, please. And then same thing on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. We will have an episode on Wednesday. Also, hats off to the Minnesota Timberwolves making their second ever Western Conference Finals. Their only 2 Game 7s happened on May 19th, 20 years apart. Kevin Garnett said, you got to load up Mac 9s, you got to load up the Uzi, the missile launcher, get ready for war. Well, Anthony Edwards had them ready for war, and they ended up finding a way to come through and winning against the reigning champion Denver Nuggets. Incredible game. Incredible game. I just have two things to say as we leave the show. Naz Reid and SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone.